Well, whenever you're trying to assess any kind of bad weather, we turn to the model data. This is the NAM. This was run at 1 o'clock today. Today is Thursday. And the first thing we're going to look at here, and I have this actually started at 7 p.m. on Saturday night. This is the 500 millibar flow. So the first thing you notice is that we have a nose of a strong jet stream coming in here across Texas and impinging on central Oklahoma, and even small little jet streaks through parts of southeast Kansas. And so those are important. So in terms of getting severe weather organized, one of the things you look for is large-scale shear in the deep layer of the atmosphere. So this is suggestive of that, and I'll show you another product here in a minute. But this is on Saturday in the evening, early evening, and I can back this up a little bit, and you can see how it kind of moves from Texas into Oklahoma there in that little 3-hour jump. So that is fairly strong, what we would call in meteorological circles, forcing for rising motion, and that's going to become important here in a minute. I'll show you. But generally speaking, if I were to just look at that pattern right there in springtime, I would go, yeah, let's investigate the possibility of severe weather, here, and maybe even a little bit bigger than that. So that's the one thing, that the challenge we're looking at. So that's 500 millibar wind speed. Let's go and take a look at some other parameters here. Again, we're just talking about Saturday. This is still 7 p.m. on Saturday evening. Let's look at how unstable the air is. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. Let's look at how unstable the air is. And for that, we can just use this thing called CAPE, surface-based CAPE. And, it's okay. It certainly is ramping up here the deeper we get into spring because basically we're getting better return of moisture from the Gulf, and the temperatures are warming. So you're getting some pretty good values here. So you're looking at CAPE values here that are going approaching 3,000 right there around Wichita Falls and right around the Red River there in Oklahoma, right around this area here. And lesser amounts, but little pockets of more unstable air. And when you see this little sweep right here, that's definitely a front that's approaching the area, a very fine line defined area. So again, we're looking at unstable air. Yeah, it's not as widespread as maybe you would like, but it is there. Now, let's take a look at some other parameters. Let's take a look at that bulk shear. So we want this bulk shear basically to be traditionally above 30. So 30, if you look on the scale down here, is in that light blue category. So we have enough bulk shear. Another thing you want to look at for severe weather is how is the shear vector, which all I have to do is just draw a line kind of along these wind barbs that you see here, and then compare that to how it looks against the dry line. And the crossing is pretty favorable to keep cells discrete. Okay, so that's another thing that we're looking at. But probably the one thing that's been debated the most for Saturday's severe weather is, simply put, it is the convective inhibition, or the idea that the atmosphere is capped. And this model run that was this afternoon is actually showing more capping than the previous couple. Again, this is just one model. But you certainly see here, no matter how favorable it looks, let's say right here, for severe weather in any other way, the thunderstorms will probably never be able to poke through a cap that strong. That's looking at, we want that to be 0, or certainly you want it to be in this part of the scale over here somewhere. Oh, I guess I'm not drawing arrows. There we go. There we go. Over this part of the scale here, and the grays and these light blues. But you'll notice that it does look like it breaks. And the reason the cap breaks along features like cold fronts and dry lines like that is because there's an additional forcing or mixing that occurs that can break through and diminish caps. So if I had to peg severe weather for this time, it would be, and the Storm Prediction Center has kind of indicated a large area, and I'll show you at the end of the video what that looks like. But it went from having a pretty large area indicated many days ago to going away completely, and now it's kind of back in the game, but it's not necessarily widespread. So a weak cap can also inhibit the amount of activity. So if you combine the idea that we have just pockets where the cap could be overcome, plus a shear vector which separates out severe thunderstorms, you could get some pretty significant but very few thunderstorms. And when the SPC issues an outlook, they're looking at more widespread results. And this still could change. It's, 2 days out. And this isn't even the big day. That's Sunday. And this is one model. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what's going on. So this is for the Ozarks. Of course, Springfield is right here. So how does this relate to Springfield? I think that severe thunderstorms, if they're going to pop, would do so in these areas along the dry line or along the front. And would probably drift into our area overnight. I don't know that they would generate over southwest Missouri, so it still may be valid that we escape at least the Saturday portion of widespread severe weather or any severe weather at all, although this is a pretty potent system, so thunderstorms may survive, and go into and drift into southwest Missouri later on that evening. It is kind of hard to say. We'll look at the shorter range models tomorrow and see what the output is. So anyway, that's the NAM looking at Saturday. So that's what you're up against. Now let's switch gears and talk about Sunday. So now all I've really done is start from 7 o'clock Saturday evening, and now we're going to go through Sunday. We're looking at the same map, same order really. This is 7 p.m. on Saturday evening. You see that 500 millibar jet stream infringing upon Missouri there. This is in the morning on Sunday, 12Z, which is 7 a.m., and then we go to 15, and then there's noon on Sunday. Again, you're talking about extremely strong jet stream impinging on all of the Midwest. And particular focus, I think, would be based on anything along the edge of this. So anything along this area right here, I think, would be trouble, maybe even more north than that. Now, this is interesting because a lot of times these jet streaks will have a curvature to them and have little tiny short waves, like perhaps this one right here. But this one is actually pretty straight. Now, when it doesn't curve, it actually, sometimes in traditional weather theory, you would divide such a jet streak into 4 quadrants. 2 would be more favorable for rising motion and possible severe storms, and 2 wouldn't be. But that's only if it's curved. If it's straight like this, you pretty much are looking along any of these areas here along the edge of the strongest winds. So any of those areas from southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, and to southern Illinois and points south of that, I think would be favorable for severe storm development if I just looked at this map and nothing else, just the 500 millibar winds. And if I go a step further here, that was 1 p.m., there's 4 p.m., and there's finally the evening hours. That's 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. This is interesting. There are 2 little shortwaves showing up, and actually this area right here would be kind of a favored quadrant sort of area if this indeed is a shortwave right here. This could get quite interesting in that area, in that box, Sunday evening. And by the way, as an aside, pretty 90+% sure I'll be chasing in that area on Sunday, and with a live stream, by the way. First time I've ever attempted that, so we'll see how that goes. And you'll hear more about that here in the next couple of days. But anyway, so that's just the wind field. Now let's go to the severe weather field. Again, remember, we're just looking at one model here. So let's look at that bulk shear. So, and back it up. So there is ample wind shear. This is in the morning on Sunday. This is 1 p.m. So there's plenty of overall shear that supports supercells. That is not an issue. Again, that's the evening hours. Now let's look at some of these other things. Let's look at the instability. See how unstable the air is? We can pick out that CAPE value. And we want surface-based CAPE. There we go. Let's back it up again. So this is at 1 p.m. So there is a front right here, and that could be enough to force some thunderstorms up in southwest Missouri into this unstable area right here. So that's something that would need to be watched, and those storms would likely go off the initiation point and continue to grow in this direction here. Meanwhile, we have this instability axis going up the Mississippi River Valley, and so that's actually pretty significant. Again, that's at 1 p.m. Saturday, and this is 4 p.m. So there's definitely a progression, I think, of thunderstorms that will be moving through the Ozarks here. Includes, of course, areas east of Springfield, and then areas in the Boot Heel, really unstable air throughout this area here. And then if we move one more ahead, you can see how that really becomes a problem around Cape Girardeau, Paducah, down to Jonesboro, Arkansas, Memphis area. Those are really unstable areas for Sunday evening. So let's look at that that convective inhibition. And so that is non-existent through this period, or at least very weak. If you back it up to noon, there's a little bit there in the afternoon. That's this area right in through here. But these developing thunderstorms in southwest Missouri wouldn't have any, so those would need to be watched. There is an area here where there's a lid, but it gets eroded by, again, just I think dynamic action of the jet stream. So by the time you get to 4 p.m., it's almost gone, and then by the time you get to 7 p.m., just a little bit of frontal induced inhibition, but the rest of this zone out through here is wide open territory, by the way. So certainly by Sunday evening for the Ozarks, that threat will have shifted east, almost completely east, except maybe for these areas out here, and around West Plains, Houston, those areas, and points east of there still would be a pretty favorable area for severe weather. Let's take a look at a few other parameters too while we got this in focus. Let me back up since we're talking about the eastern part of the Ozarks. Again, that's 1 p.m. So if we go and look at, let's say, this can be a significant variable if used correctly. This is significant tornado parameter. So, when it gets into the yellows and reds, that's something worth noting. That's at 1 p.m. on Sunday. And again, anything from Springfield on east is fair game, really, I think. And then if you look at that and how that evolves, that's 4 p.m. So a lot of it shifts far east into the Ozarks and just really gets out of southwest Missouri pretty much by 4 o'clock. Although there might be some evening regeneration in areas down around Howell County and into northern Arkansas. And if you're wondering what soundings look like, in other words, when we look at the vertical profile of the atmosphere, what do these areas look like? I can use this tool to click on that. Let's just look there, and this is again. Oh, I can't do it when I'm recording. That's right. I don't have access to the map. Sorry, but I would likely show tornado parameters are pretty high in these areas, especially up through Illinois and Indiana. Now this is 7 p.m. It's not dark yet, but getting pretty close. So as a chase, many would continue to go on, and I don't say I wouldn't go after dark. I've already shown that I do, but I don't know. We'll have more on that in a separate video. But then let's go over all the parameters now, where the advisories are for this coming weekend, so you can plan a little bit better. So the Storm Prediction Center did issue this severe weather outlook. This is the day 3 outlook. It was issued on Thursday, so that would be for Saturday. And it's the lowest of the 5 probabilities for severe weather, but it does barely include Springfield. Again, this is Saturday, not Sunday. But it does include a large portion of northern Oklahoma, a good chunk of eastern Kansas, most of northern and central Missouri up into Iowa and Illinois. Now, I think this will be adjusted, and they'll probably go ahead and move that down along the dry line when I look at this tomorrow morning, meaning it'll go down more into areas of central Oklahoma, and it'll be tweaked, certainly, between now and Saturday, because it is one of those balancing acts between that lid on the atmosphere, that cap, and instability and forcing. So it's going to be kind of interesting. If you look at what the comparison data for this date is. So if you just look at the SIPs, basically it just goes back and does an analog comparison to what happened with similar conditions in the past. You see there's definitely a severe weather maximum area, the 15% probability within 68 miles of any point in that orange color there in central Oklahoma and Texas, and a small part of Missouri there. So that's one of the reasons why we need to be alert, probably for hail and high winds, not so much tornadoes on Saturday in the afternoon, early evening especially, but you can't rule it out either. And then this is the latest outlook for Sunday. This hasn't changed a whole lot, but Springfield is on the beginning or the edge of the thunderstorms as they advance and become more severe. So just like that last tornado outbreak we had, they started out kind of on the edge, but by the time they moved just an hour east of Springfield or less, they became pretty severe, and in that case pretty tornadic. Still a little early to pull the trigger on that, although I will say that the wind fields and instability fields look very good, generally speaking, for tornadoes in that sector, certainly. And then if you look at the SIPS outlook, just again a model comparison, that actually lays down almost exactly with where the Storm Prediction Center laid out the probability and risk for Sunday afternoon and Springfield and southwest Missouri, certainly at least halfway and pretty solidly in that risk area. So we'll keep watching this situation for Saturday and Sunday. Again, it looks like a late Saturday event and more conditional. And then Sunday, the thunderstorms form over us, meaning around Springfield, and then get quickly severe the more east that they begin to track later on into the evening, becoming a real problem, I think, in the Boot Hills, southern Illinois, down along into eastern Arkansas that evening.